you very much. And thank you so much for having me take part. I'm really excited to be part of the Digital Science Festival this year. So as Jenny said, my name is Marie Dare and I'm the Learning Officer here at Macduff Marine Aquarium. And we're a native aquarium, so that means that we showcase the animals that you would find all around the Scottish coast and wider UK habitats. So today we're going to be focusing on the kelp reef habitat, which is in the main tank right behind me. So I'm going to flip my camera around so you can have a full screen view. So this is our largest tank here in the aquarium, and it is a replica habitat of a kelp reef. You'll notice that at the moment there's not a whole lot of kelp, and that's because it does tend to die off this time of year. But I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But as part of a special treat for you today, we do have our divers coming down to feed the fish. And I don't want the divers to get too cold because the water in the tank is quite cold. So I'm just going to radio up to them and let them know that we're ready for them to head down towards us. So you can just see them at the surface there, and I'm just going to radio up to our surface support and tell them we're ready for them to start the dive show. Come in, Claire, over. Are the divers ready to come down and feed the fish for us? Over.
Oh, I think they're ready and raring to go, Marie. Over.
Excellent. Well, if you send them down, who's going to be at the front feeding the fish for us? Over.
Okay, so we've got Hannah. We're standing up at the front, doing the main feed.
Thank you. Over now. Excellent. So we've got two of our divers heading down. We've got Hannah coming up to the front, and she's got the smaller bits of food, which she'll feed to all of the fish. I'll give her a wave. Hi, Hannah. That are just kind of milling about at the front of the tank here. And then Chris will be around the back, and he will be target feeding our flatfish, our skates, and our sharks, because they don't really join in with the feeding frenzy that we get at the front. So you can see them both there giving us a big wave and a big okay sign. And Chris is going off to feed the fish at the back, and Hannah is here at the front. So if I come in close and you can see what's in that food tub, we've got little bits of shrimp, we've got squid, we've got lots of different sorts of fish that's chopped up. So the fish get a really varied diet, and it's all different sizes because, as you'll notice, we've got a variety of sizes of fish in the tank as well. So the food is cut up according to their sizes of their mouths. So we're just going to scatter the feed in the water a little bit at a time, and as you'll see, the fish are quite hungry. They're quite excited. They're zooming in and grabbing bits of food and then kind of taking off and circling back again. So the really fast silvery ones with the black specks, those are salmon. So you'll see that they are just darting through and grabbing bits of food. Then we've got some that are also similar size and shape, but they're moving a bit more slowly, a bit more relaxed. The ones that have a curved line on their side, like that one there, is a pollock. And the ones that have a straight line, like that one in front of Hannah, that one is a saithe. And they are all members of the cod family. So I'm sure we'll see a cod at some point as well, but those are all important food fish. So the salmon and all of the cod are important fisheries fish, as well as a lot of the flatfish in the tank. So here was a big halibut that just came up for a bit of food as well, and I'm sure we'll see some more of those. We also have some funny looking fish in here, that kind of big blobby one, that's a lump sucker. So the lump suckers are used in the fishing industry for pest control in fish farms because they like to eat parasites off of other fish. So they'll put lump suckers in with salmon in the pens in fish farms, and it's a natural pest control for any lice or other sorts of parasites that will live on the salmon. So it helps to keep them healthy. And they're one of my favorite fish. They're just kind of cute. And when they're young especially, they're really cute and friendly. They're not very good swimmers though. You'll notice they're quite slow and they make awkward turns. Here we go, that's a halibut. Sorry, not halibut, haddock there with the spot on its side and the very pointy dorsal fin. So another member of the cod family that I'm sure many people have had with their fish suppers. That's a big male salmon there just passing through. So you can tell the male salmon by the shape of their mouths. So you'll see his bottom jaw has elongated and it's making, it's almost like a big gap in his jaw. That's called a kype. And the male salmon develop that as soon as they are mature. So it takes salmon a few years to reach maturity, but once they're mature, they'll develop the kype, and that's when they will make their journey back from sea to swim up the streams and rivers to go back to the area where they hatched from to lay their own eggs. So the female salmon don't have that shape, but they're just large and round. So there's a female one over the side there swimming towards us. Oh, there's another little male lumpsucker. It's kind of yellowy in color. He's getting some hand-fed food there. Oh, they're so cute. Here we go. Excellent. So all of these commercially important species do rely on this habitat. Oh, the conger eel is out. That's what Chris is pointing at us. So you can see down there, right on the bottom, that really long fish. That is a conger eel. So that's the largest eel we get in Europe. They're super cool because they can actually swim forwards and backwards. Not many fish can swim in reverse, but conger eels can. You can watch how it moves its whole body like a ribbon. And it can just reverse the way its muscles go so that it can change direction and swim backwards. So we have two conger eels in this tank. That one is called Silver. He's one of the bigger of the two. So the conger eels will live for about 8 to 10 years. We do have to release them. We'll do that quite soon. Because as they reach maturity, again with them, as soon as they reach maturity, they change quite a lot. So they actually stop feeding, all of their teeth drop out, and they start swimming in circles around the tank because for their life cycle, they need to migrate away to the Azores. And that's where they reproduce. And once they spawn, once they lay their eggs, they will die because that's the end of their life cycle. So that's why we need to release the conger eels as soon as they show those signs of maturity so that they can make that trip and complete their life cycles in the wild.
Just had a question there from Clippington Primary School. How many fish are in the tank?
Oh, excellent question. So there's about 130 fish in this tank. We don't count the invertebrates because, of course, they're too numerous to count. So that will be hundreds of different brittle stars, starfish, crabs, lots of other invertebrates. But we've got about 130 fish in here. And that will probably about 60 species in here as well. So the whole aquarium, we represent 100 native species and about 1,000 individual fish. There's one. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we have another question about, it's probably the one right there. What are the flatfish on the floor called?
On the floor. Okay, so there's a few different types. So that one that was just swimming around, that one is a turbot. So the turbot are quite round, almost like a big dinner plate. So that's the turbot. That's how we can tell them apart. So all of the roundish ones are turbot. They are excellent at camouflage. So you'll see that they blend in really well with the sediment on the bottom. The ones that have orange spots, so you can see there's one with orange spots there swimming away. That's a plaice. And then we also have the halibut. So the halibut are more kind of diamond shaped and a bit darker in color. And they are the more predatory species of all of the flatfish in here. They're also the largest flatfish in the world. So an Atlantic halibut can grow to be 5 meters long. So that is the whole depth of this tank. So this tank is 5 meters deep. If I go all the way up to the top, again, appreciate how deep that is, and 10 meters across. So it's not big enough for a fully grown Atlantic halibut. So again, we would have to release those guys when they get too big for our tank. Right, Hannah has finished feeding the fish, so we can do a little bit of a chat with Hannah, but of course, being that she's underwater, she can't really hear what we're saying. So when we're communicating with the divers, we'll have to use hand signals. Oh, the wolffish came for a cuddle. So the hand signals that divers currently use is okay. So we can ask if she's okay. Yeah, so that's great. I'm going to ask her if she's cold by rubbing my arms. She says she's a little bit cold. So the water is actually warmer in the ocean this time of year, although it's starting to cool down on land for us. The ocean is warmest in October around here. So it's not too bad at the moment. It's about 14 degrees Celsius. So still chilly, which is why she's wearing her dry suit to keep nice and cozy. But it does get a lot cooler in the spring. It will go down to about 8 degrees, which is as cold as it generally gets in our local waters. So we can ask Hannah to do a few things for us. We can ask her to go up. Yeah, that's the signal for going up. So that way she can go up in the water. And then when she wants to come down, we just use a thumb down signal and she will come down. Now we'll see if Hannah can find any animals to show us as well. So she might go off and have a hunt and see if there is anything at the bottom that she can bring up for us to have a closer look. Let's see what she's found. Oh, she's just playing peekaboo. Look, we've got a sea urchin who's wearing a hat. So the sea urchins quite often like to attach bits of algae and rocks and other bits of debris and detritus, and that all helps them to camouflage. So this one is an edible urchin. So yes, people do eat it. It's part of the starfish family, and one of the things they have in common with starfish are those long tube feet. So if you look at the bits hanging out in between the spines are the tube feet, and at the end of each little tube foot, it's got a suction cup. So that's how it moves itself around. See, it's suctioned to Hannah's hand with all of those little tube feet holding on. So Hannah's going to have to very gently release those tube feet before she can pop the urchin back down on the ground. Now, urchins are grazers, and one of their favorite foods is kelp. Oh, it's stuck to her. She can't get it off. Going to have to hold it for the rest of the show. Okay, 1 minute. Let's see what she's going to do. I guess she'll go look for somewhere else to pop it. Yeah. There's Chris has still got some food. So you'll see Chris has much bigger pieces of food. So he's got fillets and whole fish and whole squid. And that's what he's going to be feeding to the flatfish, the congers, and the sharks as well. So let's see what he's up to. So Chris is one of our aquarists, so it's actually his job to look after the fish. Oh, he's bringing up a wolffish for us to have a close look at. So the wolffish looks a bit like an eel. It's got an elongated body, but it is a type of fish. And you'll notice how it sinks very quickly. And that's because it's a little bit different than most of the other fish in this tank. So most of the fish we've been looking at, they've got a swim bladder, which is like a internal armband. So when you guys were learning to swim, you probably wore like water wings or armbands to help you float. And lots of these fish have that inside of their bodies. They've got a little air bladder in their bodies that they can control the amount of air, and it helps them float. But the wolffish doesn't have that, which is why it sinks really quickly as soon as it stops swimming. Right, Hannah has found us a beautiful common starfish. So this is, as its name implies, the most common species of starfish that you can find around Scottish coast. And if you go rock pooling at any rocky shore, if you look under rocks and you're lucky, you can find small versions of this species. So just small varieties of starfish. So you'll notice it's kind of a creamy color. They can be pink or purple, but they always have this kind of purplish pattern through the body. So that's how we can identify the species. So that's about as big as it gets. Might be slightly bigger, but you'll find really tiny little baby ones in the rock pools, especially if you go in the spring and summer months. Right, Hannah's now flipped it over so we can see the underside. And so you can see, just like the urchin, it's got the tube feet with the suction cups on the end. And in the middle of the starfish's body, that's where its mouth is located. So starfish are quite interesting in the way that they feed. They don't put food in their mouths like how we do. What they do is they'll actually puff up their body in the middle, and then they stick their stomach out of their mouths and wrap their stomachs around the food that they're trying to eat. So this one is actually opening its mouth at the minute. We can see a hole is opening there. And if it was to smell, they have excellent senses of smell. If it was to smell any food, it would begin to extend its stomach to try and see if that was something worth eating. Thank you. Yes, yeah. And that one was spawning a little bit then. That was the white stuff we were seeing coming off of it. The wolfus is very friendly. He's looking for more food, I think. He's like giving Hannah kisses. Right, we'll see what else Hannah can find first. Maybe she'll find us a crab. We'll ask her.
Got some questions there about the biggest and smallest fish that you have in the tank.
Okay, so the smallest fish are probably the lump suckers, like that little one going at the top there, or perhaps the bluemouth. It's different shape, so it's hard to tell, but that's a bluemouth there sat on the rock. Oh, yes, she's got us a crab. I'll come back to the biggest fish in a minute. So this is an edible crab. So this is one of the species of crabs that the fishermen will go out and try to trap in their fish nets and stuff. So it's one of the species that people like to eat. So if you order crab in a restaurant, it is probably this type of crab. This one is still a relatively small one. They can get to be almost double in size of the one that Hannah's holding just now. But they are a super cute little crab. And I think one of the reasons why they're so popular with fishermen is because as soon as you hold them, that's exactly what they do. They just tuck all of their legs in. They're not an aggressive type of crab. They don't try to nip you. They just tuck everything in and pretend to be a rock. And so that's what that guy's doing. He's pretending to be a rock in the hopes that Hannah will lose interest in him and think it's just a boring old rock, not something nice to eat. And she will let him go, which is exactly what she'll do in a minute. But you can have a really nice close up of his eyes. You can see his mouth part there beating. And that's exactly how they feed in the water. Thank you very much. So the biggest fish we have is in fact one of our turbot, so the big flatfish. We also have a very large Atlantic halibut. As I mentioned, they can grow to be 5 meters. So the one that we have is just under 2 meters. But being that this tank is only 5 meters deep and 10 meters across, we wouldn't want to fish too much bigger than that in here. The sharks, like what you can see swimming on the bottom there, one of them has a big bit of fish. That is another of our larger fish. So they can be about 1.8 meters when fully grown. And this is actually one of their egg cases attached to that bit of kelp that Hannah has brought up to show us. So as I mentioned, kelp is a really important component of a lot of our native habitats. It's what we call a macroalgae, which means it's a big type of seaweed, and it's different from plants because it doesn't have a root system. Instead, it has a hold fast, which is this complex at the bottom that anchors it into the rocks. So it looks like roots, but it doesn't do anything apart from anchoring the whole kelp to the rock bed. And then this bit here in the middle is called a stipe. And then at the top, we get the blade, which is where it traps all of the sunlight to make its own food. So it's really important as a food source and a bit of habitat. And it's also important for our native shark species because it's where they like to lay their eggs. So you can see this egg case has those long curly tendrils, and the sharks, when they're laying the eggs, will swim around and around the kelp, and they will hook the egg on with those curly tendrils, and then they'll leave the egg there to continue to develop until it hatches. So this species of shark, the bull husk or the greater spotted cat shark, takes about 9 months for its egg to hatch in our temperatures that we have around Scotland. So the species is also found in the Mediterranean, and the eggs will hatch faster there because the water is a bit warmer, so they can hatch in about 6 months' time. So that is one of our egg cases there. Thank you, Hannah. That's great. So the divers do collect the egg cases and take them out of the tank because those hungry cod, that's one of the cod there, you can see it's got a little hook on its chin. They will actually eat the eggs if we are to leave them in the tank. So the divers remove them and we incubate them and hatch them out in our quarantine facilities. Oh, Chris is out of food. He's finished. So he's filling his tub up with air and he released it out to the surface. Excellent. Any other questions coming in there?
We've had a question about how much water there is in the tank.
So it is 400,000 litres of water, enough for a bath every day for about 5 years.
And we've had a question about asking where do you get the fish from?
Oh, that's a good question. So because they're native fish, it means that we can't really buy them from aquarium supply shops like how a lot of other aquariums that have tropical species on display can. So we have to rely on fishermen to catch them for us, or our divers will actually go out and do collections as well. So a lot of the fish in here are wild caught fish. We get them when they're quite young, and then we grow them on to the size that they are. So most of these fish would have been in the aquarium for quite a long time already. A few of them will come from farms. So the salmon came from a salmon farm. Some of the halibut came from a halibut farm because halibut are actually endangered in the wild. So you can't really find wild caught salmon, halibut or salmon for that matter, very easily. So we do have to rely on farmed animals for those. But the majority of the rest of them were wild caught. And then a lot of our sharks and rays were born at the aquarium because we've got a breeding population. So here's one of our rays going to play in Hannah's bubbles. So that's a thornback skate. They're called thornback rays, but it's actually a type of skate. It's a common misnomer. And that's one of the reasons why scientific names are so important, because a lot of common names when it comes to animals can be confusing. Right, now Hannah has brought us two starfish to have a look at. So these are both spiny starfish, which is our largest species of starfish. And she's excited because she got one to stick to the glass. It's always difficult to get the starfish to cooperate, but here we go. This one has used its wiggly tube feet with all of those suction cups to adhere to the glass. And you can see that with this species of starfish, the tube feet are really, really thick. They're very strong. They're very good at clinging. And that's because this is a deeper water species and it will like to be in areas where there's quite a lot of current. So they need to be able to cling onto the rocks really strong. Oh, that one does not want to stick. Oh, well, we'll just give him a cuddle instead. Excellent. Thank you. So if we have another close look, you can see all of those wiggly tube feet, the mouth in the middle. And with this species, you can actually see their eye spots more clearly. If I could figure out how to show you guys, quite difficult. But on the tips of each arm, can't seem to get it in the shot. Here we go. There's a tiny black dot. Maybe Hannah will help us when she comes back to the screen. So there's a tiny black dot on the end of each arm of the starfish, and that's its eye spot. So I've just asked her to show us the eye spots if she can. So the starfish are able to see just if they're in a light or in a dark area. So that's the only thing they can tell. And she's not really understanding my hand signals, that eye spot. She's just looking really closely. My hand signals are not working. If there's time, I can go out to the touch pools and I'll show you on one of the animals that I can reach out there. But yeah, so starfish just have light sensors, and that's so they can tell if they are in a nice bright area or if they're hidden away under a rock. Fantastic. Any other questions anybody else wants to ask before I
We've got heaps of questions for you. So there's a couple asking how long the aquarium's been open. I know you're shut at the moment for renovations, but maybe you could say when you're hopefully reopening.
Yeah, so the aquarium was built in 1997. So we celebrated our 25th anniversary a couple of years back, and it's closed at the moment for some refurbishment. So when we reopen, hopefully in early 2026, we will have a cafe, a learning room, and a lobster hatchery. So we're very excited to have investment, and yeah, very keen for our lobster hatchery to open to the public as well.
That sounds great. There's a couple of technical questions here for you. Why do the fish swim in different ways, up and down and side to side? And why do they swim up to the top before coming back down again?
Okay, fantastic. Really good questions. So the fish swimming depends on their body shape and design. So if you look at the fish like the salmon, which are quite fast swimmers, they use their tail as their main propulsion, compared to our lump sucker, have kind of a lumpy body shape. They will use their side fins for their main propulsion. And then if you have a look at the sharks, they use their whole body's really flexible, so they make a big S shape. And then the flatfish, like our skate, they will use their rays, the edges of their bodies to propel themselves along. So the body shape is really important with how fish swim. And they just move around at the moment because the divers are in. They're all looking to see what food they can find. So they're moving around the water column all the time. Some of them will harass the divers until the divers are totally out of food. And they're just exploring, looking for food and moving around. So most of our cat sharks, like the one swimming up there just now, are actually nocturnal species. So most of the time when you see them during the day, they're just lazing about on the bottom. But because the divers are in just now to feed everybody, they're all looking around for food. At the moment, because the aquarium is closed, we're not diving as frequently as we normally do, which means that they're all a little bit hungrier than usual. So that's why there's lots of activity and lots of swimming about just now.
How often do you normally feed them then? Is it like every day or twice a week or something? Or
yes, it's normally 3 times a week that they're fed. And at the minute, we're feeding them kind of every 4th day. So we've spread it out a little bit just due to staffing and because we don't have everybody on site, because we need 4 members of the team on site to have the numbers required to dive safely. So we need to have 2 members in the water, 1 at the top for surface support, and someone else in the building in case an emergency occurs that we can alert emergency services.
okay, I've got another couple of questions about the tank itself. So how do you keep the tank clean? Is from Manor Park. And have any of your divers ever been stung by a stingray?
Oh, excellent questions. Okay, so keeping the tank clean is lots of hard work all the time. So every time that we go in, we clean the inside of the acrylic. So the divers will probably start doing that in a minute. They have special algae pads that they'll use to clean the inside of the tank. And then we also have to hoover the bottom of the tank. So just like how if you have a fish tank at home, you'd use a siphon to clean out the fish poo and the muck and the bits and pieces at the bottom, we have to do that on a big scale with this tank. So we've got a really big siphon. We call it hoovering the tank, but it's just a giant siphon. And we go through and clean up all the mess in the corners, any excess food that isn't eaten, and all of the debris from the kelp as it breaks down and stuff. All of those bits have to be taken out. So it's ongoing. Every time the divers are in the tank, they clean the tank as well. So it's a constant job to keep it clean. Remind me of the other question. Sorry, it was too fun.
Have they ever been stung by a stingray, the divers?
So we don't have any stingrays. So the quick answer is no. Nobody's been stung. We don't have stingrays.
Okay.
These, what we do have are thornback skates. So they're not rays, they're skates. So they don't actually have a sting on their tail. They do still use their tail for defense, but instead of a sting, they've got a row of thorns on their tail, which is why they're called thornbacks. So when they get scared or they feel threatened, they'll whip their tail up and they can give you a whack with their tails. And yes, our divers have been whacked but it doesn't cause any permanent damage. The divers do get bitten on occasion on the fingers as they're feeding the fish, but as you'll see, we do wear thick gloves, and that's because of the cold as well as just for protection, because sometimes the fish, their eyesight is not great, and they just get overexcited and they miss the food and go for the hand instead. So that's just one of the hazards of feeding fish by hand.
That leads nicely onto my next question from Broomhill Primary, who says, are there any dangerous sharks in the tank that would attack the divers or eat the other fish?
So all of the sharks have the potential to try to eat the other fish. They are a voracious predator, but given that they're not the largest fish in the tank, they're not the most voracious predators that we have. So the most voracious predators in the tank are halibut. So those are the larger flatfish, and they are the ones actually that most often bite the divers and do bite other fish as well. Oh, hard work. Chris is working really hard here to clean the glass. He does like a bit of sympathy when he's doing some scrubbing. So yes, the sharks, for the most part, the ones that we have, they are not dangerous to the divers at all. I mean, they do have big sharp teeth, but they're relatively gentle compared to the cod and the other fish that are a little bit more aggressive in their feeding techniques, and they don't often try to eat the other fish because we do keep them all relatively well fed. So hopefully that answers that question for Broomhill.
I think so. So another class are learning about I don't know if I got this right, cephalopods. So do you have any octopuses in the tank?
Yes. So at the moment, we don't have any octopus. As soon as we closed, we released our octopus. We do have a specialized octopus tank, so we do normally have an octopus on display. But given that octopus have quite a short lifespan, so again, they will generally only live for a few years, up to 5 at the most for the species that we get locally. So we tend to only keep them for about 6 months at a time, and then we release them, because once they reproduce, again, they will die once they lay their eggs. Chris is blowing bubbles at Hannah. Look at her, she's getting blown out of the water. Yes.
Okay. How long do the divers stay underwater then? Are they in for like half an hour at a time, or can they stay in for longer, or how long?
It just depends on the amount of work that they have to do. So their average tank that they're wearing. So I'll just ask Chris to turn around if I can get his attention. Can you just turn around for me? Thank you. There we go. So you can see he's wearing one main tank, a 50-liter tank, and then a smaller pony. So the amount of air on his back would fill a phone booth. So if you think about if you were locked in an old-fashioned phone booth that you would use to make phone calls, one of those red ones that you sometimes see around old villages, that's how much air is in there. And it will last a diver at this sort of depth, so about 5 meters, a diver, if they're not doing too much hard work, they could stay down for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depending on how heavily they were breathing and their lung capacity. So women have smaller lungs than men. So I could quite easily dive on a single tank in this tank for about 2 hours, whereas Chris would probably run out of air in about an hour and a half. But the average dive time is usually about 40 minutes or so. So by the time they've fed the fish, they've cleaned everything up, that's usually about it. If they're hoovering, they might stay in a bit longer. But given that the temperature it does get cold after about half an hour or so. So we don't tend to spend too much longer than 40 minutes on average. Sorry, back to the octopus question. I was distracted by the divers. We did make a video of our octopus release, so if anybody's interested, we got some really nice drone footage of it. So if you go onto the aquarium's YouTube channel, it's one of our most recent videos because we did it as soon as the aquarium closed in September. So you can check that out if you're interested in seeing our octopus.
Okay, I hope that answers that question. We've got a couple of fish, like which is the most common fish, what's the oldest fish, how long do you keep the fish type questions. So they're just like general fish type.
Okay,
so yeah, how many, sorry.
Most common fish you'll find Scotland is probably the dab, which is one of the smaller flatfish species. Here's one of the halibut, so it's a young halibut there. So the dab look very similar to a halibut, they're just much smaller. So they only get to be about 20 centimeters long, and they are very, very common in any sandy or muddy habitat. So you'll find them in estuaries and just along any sandy beach. So that's probably the most common fish species. The fish that we've had the longest at the aquarium, we think are a pair of bluemouths that are in this tank. So they normally hang out on the arch, but I'm not seeing them at the moment. They must be on the other side. But they are small, deep water fish. They've got big red eyes, and they're quite a long-lived fish species. They can live for about 80 years. And the pair that we have were fully grown when they came to the aquarium, when the aquarium opened. So they've been here since the very beginning, and they're still doing well in this habitat. With fish, it's quite difficult to tell how old they are, because really the only way to get an accurate age is to count the rings on their ear bones. So inside of their head, they've got ear bones, just like we do, but that's how you age fish. You count the rings on the ear bones, called otoliths, just like how you would count rings on a tree. But of course, the fish has to be dead for you to access its ear bones. So when a fish is still alive, it's quite tricky to get an idea of how old it is accurately anyways. You can go by size for some parts, but you know, if they've got a good diet, then obviously they'll grow faster and be bigger. So size is not very reliable. What was the other one for that?
I think, do you have any seahorses? That's another one.
Moment. We do typically have seahorses on display, but again, seahorses are not very long lived, and our seahorses came to the end of their natural lifespan. In fact, the last one was well over his natural lifespan. They usually live about 5 years in captivity, and our last seahorse was 8 when he died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a very long-lived seahorse, but given that we were closing, we didn't replace the seahorses, but we do hope to have seahorses on display again by the time we reopen. So yeah, you definitely check out our YouTube channel again for seahorse videos if that's one of your favorite animals.
Another, I'm not sure, I think it might be Manor Park, asking, how do starfish breathe?
Oh, that's a good question. So starfish, really, really simple body plan. So they don't have gills per se, like how a lot of the other fish do. We've got a big turbot there. What the starfish do is they use seawater instead of blood. So they pump the seawater directly into their bodies, and then their tissues absorb the oxygen out of the seawater directly. So a very simple body plan, and they just have seawater flowing around inside of their body, and that's what they use for locomotion. So they have a hydrostatic skeleton. They use water pressure to move around, and they also use the oxygen that's dissolved in the seawater, so they absorb it directly into their tissues.
Cool. I'm just going, we've got a lot of questions. I'm just trying to pick out ones that we haven't maybe already covered.
No
do fish sleep? There's one.
Yes, some of them do. Oh, the lobster is coming out. I don't know if you guys can see him. He's down in the bottom corner. Can you see him walking along the bottom there? He might continue to walk towards us, hopefully. He's just climbing over a rock there. Excuse me, Mr. Pollock, you're blocking the view. There we go. Oh, now there's a cod in the way. These fish and their photo bombing. There you go. Can you see that lobster coming out? You can see his long.
Oh yeah, just down at the bottom there behind that rock.
Yeah, so that's one of our common lobsters. So lobsters are really interesting as well because they can live for a very, very long time. They don't age like we do. It's not thought that they age at all, really. The thing that ends up killing them is that their exoskeleton gets too heavy to move. So they essentially get too big and their biology fails them. But this one seems to be doing some redecorating. He's not happy with where that kelp is. So he's moving it out. I'm not sure where he's taking it, but he is redecorating this afternoon. There we go. Sorry, I was in the middle of answering a question.
What happens when fish sleep? How do fish sleep?
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
I got sidetracked as well.
Oh, they're really distracted me because they don't normally come out, so I get excited when I see them out moving around. So yes, the sharks in particular are, as I mentioned, they're nocturnal. So in the daytime, you'll just see them dozing. So here, oh, that's the wolffish. I thought that was a shark. They all seem to be moving around just now, but oh, there's one. I don't know if you can make it out, but it's just lying on the bottom. So it essentially just looks like a rock. So you might not be able to distinguish it as it's not moving, but it's just the gray blob lying behind that bit of kelp. And that one is asleep just now. Most of the fish that swim about, like these ones, they actually can sleep while they're swimming, so they don't ever stop. But some of the other species, like the wrasse, which are the little kind of pinky ones that you see swimming around, sometimes they will wrap themselves up in kelp or seaweed to secure themselves in place, and then they'll take a nap that way. But all fish do sleep. They're capable of shutting down a part of their brain at a time so that the rest of them just kind of goes on autopilot while they have a rest. But they don't have eyelids. They're always open.
All right, so the eyes stay open even though they're sleeping.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any endangered species in the tank?
Oh, excellent question. Love that one. So yes, the Atlantic halibut, so that flatfish, that is an endangered species. It's endangered in Europe and in decline worldwide. And that is a fish that is still fished. So you can still buy wild caught halibut. And it's really unfortunate that fish don't get the same level of protection as a lot of land-based species do. Like, for instance, if lions were endangered, you would never be able to go down to your local shop and buy lion steaks, but you can still go to the fishmonger and buy halibut, although it is an endangered species. A lot of our shark species are also near threatened or endangered. So there's different classifications, different levels according to how many are still out there in the population. So the thornback skates, the ones that we've seen up close, and there's a couple on the bottom there, that species is near threatened. So that means they're in decline in the wild. The bullhuss, that larger shark species, is also near threatened. And then other members of our native shark species, like the angel shark and the flapper skate, are critically endangered. So we don't have those on display, but they are British sharks that are endangered in our local waters. And the reason that sharks in particular are vulnerable and a lot of them are threatened or endangered is because their life cycle is quite slow compared to bony fish. So all of these fish that we're seeing here, like the cod, for example, a large cod will produce about 10 million eggs a year. So although those 10 million eggs, not all of them are going to survive, a large portion do, and they reach maturity, they get big quite quickly. Our sharks, like our bullhuss here, they only lay about 40 eggs a year. And although they have a higher survival rate for the eggs themselves, they take a long time to reach maturity. So if they're fished or caught before they've had a chance to lay eggs of their own, that means that they can't replenish the population. So that's why a lot of shark species are in trouble, is because they're being fished faster than they can make more of themselves.
I didn't realise that. That's a shame. That they're overfished to an extent, I suppose. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah.
There is another couple of questions. Do you have other fish that we haven't heard about or seen yet? So are there ones hiding in there somewhere that we don't know about yet?
Yeah, probably lots that we haven't actually seen. I'll pop around to the half moon window. So bear with me. I hope I won't make anybody motion sick as I move across the aquarium. So the half moon window is just another view into the same tank. And I just want to really show you Hank. So here is Hank. So Hank is one of our Atlantic halibut, and you'll notice that he's got some blue on him. So the blue is actually a treatment. So you can see someone had asked about fish trying to eat each other. So unfortunately, we think one of the other halibut had a go at Hank's tail. So we're not sure if that was them trying to eat him on purpose or if his tail was just, you know, close to a bit of food or what happened. But you can see he's got a bit of damage to his tail. So the Acris, Chris, and Hannah, they have been treating that. So that blue stuff is an antibiotic, which will hopefully help him to heal up really quickly. In here, we can also see the conger eel. You can see a part of his body, so and his tail is hanging out on that side. He likes to live in this big pike down at the bottom. Don't know if we can see his face, but that's where he likes to hang out. Here is one of our baleen wrasse. Oh, he's just gone back to the other window now that I'm at this window. But I think I've seen most of the ones in here. They've been mostly friendly. I'll go back around because it's a bit louder through here. A lot more water noises. Oh, I'll just show you really quickly all of our beautiful brittle stars. So that's our delicates tank. So we've got loads of very, very pretty brittle stars and some super tiny little starfish. So if you go rock pooling, that's the sort of size you'll probably find under the rocks.
I've got a couple of other questions. Just what happens if, just having seen that one with these antibiotics on his tail, what happens if one of the creatures is unwell? How do you tell, or what do you do? I mean, I know your divers go in and help treat them that, but is there a local vet that you take them to, or does a vet come and visit you? And then what happens if the worst happens and they die either of old age or illness? What happens to them then?
Okay, so great question. So yes, we do have a vet part of our zoo license requirement. So because we have a large collection of live animals, we are required to have a zoo license as well. So there's lots of regulations and annual inspections that we have to meet to make sure that we maintain the standards required for animal welfare that are set out by the zoo license requirement. And part of our refurbishment process is actually to improve our quarantine facilities. So that is where any sick fish will go. So Hank, because he's a relatively large fish, and his wounds, although they do look pretty bad, they are superficial. So it's just like us having a graze. So we've just put the antibiotic spray on and he will heal up, no problem, in the tank. Now, if they were much deeper cuts, or if he was showing signs of an infection and not eating and not behaving like his normal self, then we would remove him and put him in a quarantine tank where we could observe him more closely, monitor exactly what he was eating, and we can actually put antibiotics into the water as well to further his treatment. And yes, we do have fish that die of natural causes, and their bodies are just treated with respect. They're removed from the tank and disposed of accordingly.
Okay, do you have turtles or other reptiles there?
No, unfortunately, no reptiles. So we don't really have any tanks big enough for marine sea turtles, although they can be found in UK waters. They're not typical residents, and so we just wouldn't have space enough to find them. And as we're a marine aquarium, we don't showcase any other reptiles.
Okay. So a couple of people have asked how you get the fish in the tank in the first place, and also how do you get them back out again? I'm not sure if they mean from like when you start, like with an empty tank, who do you decide who goes in and who doesn't, who makes the cut, or you know, if you're having to, like when you're doing your renovations, that do you empty the tank so all the fish go free and then you reset it with a whole new different bunch of fish?
Well, logistically, because this tank is 10 meters high, the top of the tank is actually at the roof of the building. So we've got a ladder to access the top of the tank and a big winch. So when we have to move animals up and down, we have big lifting containers that they go into, and then they get wrapped up with cables and lowered down the void by the winch, because obviously they're quite heavy, so it's quite tricky. And that's how we bring the dive gear up and down as well, and then the divers will climb down the ladder. So that's how we access this tank. For the refurbishment, we're not really planning on moving too many of the animals, so this tank will remain as it is, and the smaller tanks, when we do have to empty those for them to be changed, we'll just move the fish into some of the other tanks. This one won't change very much because all of these are kind of larger fish, and the fish around the rest of the aquarium are quite small, so we couldn't put them in with these because the size difference would mean that the larger fish in here would try to eat some of the smaller ones. So we are quite careful about the size relationship of the animals that are kept together to make sure that they're not eating each other. But it's just a matter of catching the fish out when we need to. So in here, it can be quite challenging. So if, for example, we did have to empty this tank for refurbishment back in 2017, and what they did was they drained it down so that it was only about 2 meters deep, so that the fish were more concentrated, and then they just used giant nets to capture them. For the eels, when we release the eels, we've got a big lifting bag that we'll use, and we'll hire a crane that will come and position itself over the tank, and we'll coax the eel into the lifting bag, and then the crane will swing out into the sea and drop it in the sea, because we're right on the coast, so we can access the sea directly. So that's how we release any of the large animals if we need to do that. So very technical question.
It's important questions. Are there any families of fish there? Like, have you got like grandparents who've had baby fish who've then had baby fish? You know, have you got a like hereditary line, if you like, of fish?
So because all of the other fish species, they lay very small eggs. So the eggs go out with our filtration system, they go out with the outflow, and they will go out to sea. So all of the fish eggs just go out to sea and are part of the wider population. But because the rays and the skates, they lay large mermaids' purses, like what you can find washed up on the beach. And we do keep those, the divers will collect them and we'll hatch them on site. So we do have families of rays and sharks, but they're the only ones that are kept in the system, if you like. The other eggs, as they laid, they just go out with the wastewater back to sea. We wouldn't have the capacity to keep those eggs and
You've gone on to mute there, Marie.
Don't know what happened there.
She's just gone on to mute, so hopefully she'll.
Well, just while we're waiting for Mary to come back on, that there's some really good questions that some of them are almost like doubled up. So I've been trying to scroll through them to make sure that we're covering most of the questions, and hopefully if there's anything we haven't answered, then what I can do is drop Mary in.
Sorry about that. I must have hit the mute button by mistake. I'm not sure how that happened.
It's okay. I'm just saying if there's any questions there that I haven't answered, what I'll maybe do is drop you a wee email, and you can answer them at your leisure, and I can ping it back out to schools.
Yeah.
I think I've covered most of the general questions. I think Gordon Primary are asking, which is your favourite fish?
Oh, the lump suckers have got to be my favourites. The baby. So but yeah, I do really like the sharks as well. The bullhassa, they have such different patterns, although they're all the same species. You can have some that have like leopard spots on them, and then you can have plain grey ones like that one in the background there. So there's such a lot of variation. They're very, very interesting. So they are really, really cool animals as well. But yeah, lots of favourites. It's very difficult to choose.
It's very diplomatic of you. Another question, do any of your fish do special dances, and which is the best behaved fish that you have? Again, it maybe just depends on the day of the week and what the weather's doing.
So special dances. Lots of fish do dance, actually. They have lots of interesting courtship behaviors. So, for example, the baleen wrasse. So here's one of them here. Oh, move Mr. Pollock. Behind the pollock, there you can see that kind of pinky one. So the males will make a nest. So you'll choose a bit, usually on a rock like this here. They'll choose a bit and they will kind of manicure the algae. So it's like they tend to their algae and they make it really beautiful. And then they do complex dances to attract a female in to lay her eggs. And so it's very interesting to watch because they'll like I want to say fly up, but they'll swim up and they'll wiggle and they kind of shake and jiggle their whole body around. And then when the female comes over, they circle her and they'll encourage her to come and check out the patch. So there is lots of really interesting behaviors that when you come as a visitor, you might not notice because you're like, oh, that fish is acting weird. Whereas because we see them every day, we kind of realize a little bit more about what these behaviors mean. But yeah, lots of fish will do mating dances and stuff that are very interesting to watch. I think the pollock in general, I always think of them as polite pollock. So these are the pollock here, the kind of they kind of look a bit grumpy. They've got an upturned mouth, so they always look a little bit like they're pouting. But the pollock, when you're feeding the fish, so I'm one of the divers as well, so I do go in and feed the fish as well, and the pollock will actually queue to be fed. A lot of the other fish will zoom in and try to like tackle the food out of your hands and stuff, but the pollock are always polite. So they are very well behaved. So Santa makes sure that they get lots of treats.
Oh, that's good. Do any of your fish have names? I think you have mentioned quite a few actually.
Yeah, I've mentioned a few. So the big characters, the ones that are easily identifiable, they have names. But a lot of them, as you can see, are quite similar and quite difficult to identify. So they don't all have names, but the actress Chris, he would be able to name a lot more of them for you than I can.
Somebody asked earlier on, how do you become a diver at the aquarium, or what qualifications do you need to become a diver?
Excellent. So you can actually start diving. You can do Discover Scuba from the time you are 8 years old. So if you Google scuba clubs, so there's usually a few in your local area if you look them up. So there's an Ellen Scuba Club in Aberdeenshire, and they will do Discover Scuba sessions at swimming pools. So you can go along to a swimming pool and try out some scuba gear and see what it's like to breathe underwater. And then I think you can do your open water diving certificate at 16. And then after that, if you want to dive in a commercial setting like at the aquarium, you have to get certified to at least a rescue diver certification. So that's 3 or 4 qualifications into your diving with the levels of diving. And then you also need to pass an HSC dive medical. So it's a fitness test and a medical examination to make sure that you are fit and healthy to dive in a work environment. So quite a few hoops to jump through.
Sure, it's worth it in the end. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. That was really fantastic. Thanks so much, Mary, for giving up your time, and also passing our thanks to Chris and Hannah for doing the fish feeding for us. It was really interesting, and like I say, I'll pop the questions into an email for you, and you can maybe answer them at your leisure, and I'll ping them back out to schools that attended. Thank you also to our audience who've come along this afternoon. I'm hoping you enjoyed it all. I found it really interesting, so I'm happy. So that was really good. If you enjoyed this presentation, please remember our festival runs until the 8th of November, which is Friday night, and our programme is available online, and I'm sure you'll find other things to enjoy. But from this afternoon, oh, that was just so good. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for coming.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. Get in touch with the aquarium if you've got any questions directly, or if there's anything that we can do to support learning in your classrooms. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.